Okay, in today's class, we're going to look at indirect speech. So, with indirect speech, we're looking at polite ways, or sometimes more complicated ways to ask questions. We looked in previous lessons about being direct and simple with language, using verb to do. Why do is better than be? Because do explains processes. It's very clear, it's succinct, it's concise. Verb to be works with adjectives and nouns. Generally, it's convoluted. But we need to know, for good language, when we need to be clear and when we need to not be. And so for us, indirect speech, it's about polite language. And so what do we mean by that? Well, I can ask you directly, for example, what time is it? Now, structure, there's nothing wrong with this question. But this is a rude question. If I ask someone on the street this, excuse me, what time is it? It's kind of a blunt question. It's very rude. So what do we ask instead of that? Well, we ask, do you have the time? All right, so you probably know this. Now, what is the literal answer to this question? Do you have the time? Well, the literal answer is yes, walk away. Someone says, excuse me, do you have the time? You say, yeah, I don't need it anymore. It's fine. But we know when someone asks us X, which is, what they want is what time is it? But they actually ask us, why? So when they ask us why, we know they want X. So when you ask me, excuse me, do you have the time? I say, sure, it's 10:35. Now when you ask me why, politely, by not being direct, I understand what you actually want is X. This is kind of like what magicians call sleight of hand. When I want to do a magic trick, pull something out of my left jacket here into my left hand, I'll take your attention away with the right hand. And while your attention's over here, I'm able to pull this out of my hand and make it look like magic. It's the same thing. In Brazilian culture, we do this in Brazil. Not so much with language, but more or less. When I come into a lunchroom with an ice cream, what's the first thing I do? Sequer. And then what's the first thing you say? Nobody got it. I have to offer you that ice cream, and you have to say no. That's how we show that we're good people. If I come in and just eat that ice cream, you think, puta que pariu, like this guy's an asshole. Even if, when you were a kid, your pediatrician said, listen, if you ever touch ice cream in your life, you're going to get super COVID, super AIDS, super everything. You're going to die. You can never touch ice cream. Still, 25 years later, when you're sitting in that lunchroom, I come in and, hey, what's up? You think, puta que pariu, cara, eu sei que eu não posso comer ice cream, mas esse filho da puta deveria oferecer no mínimo. So we do this in Portuguese. It's a silly dance, but we do this out of respect for one another. I have to offer, you have to say no. So this is kind of the same thing. By showing respect to you, in many ways, a person on the street or a person I don't know, I want to know X, but I ask you why. So do you have the time? Sure, it's 10:35. If I ask you, excuse me, what time is it? You feel like it's a poking finger. That's a little bit rude. Okay, so we know that with our indirect speech, we're trying not to be interrogative. We're trying not to make this an interrogation. So let's look at ways that we can do this. So ways that we can reduce the intensity or the bluntness of our language. So let's say I ask you the question, can you look after the kids? We say, okay, well, how can we reduce the directness? How can we reduce the force of this language? We have these kind of very direct, very strong words here. So we can do what we learn in a grammar book. And so we learn that when we want to be polite, we turn can into could. And could you look after the kids? And of course here as well, let's put a please on the end. All right, that's not too bad. But I think we can reduce that even more if I can figure out how to reduce the screen. There we go. All right, I think we can reduce this even more. So we have to look at, okay, well, let's keep the main idea can you look after the kids? Let's look at the idea of can. So what does can represent? Well, if I say, for example, I can't go to the party, or I can't go to the party, what's the difference? In grammar, there's nothing, but they kind of say two different things. In the first example, I can't go to the party, I have no car. So we're talking about the ability. I have no car, I have no mode of transport, but if someone gives me a lift, I'll go to the party. In the second one, well, my mom is angry, so I have no permission. So when we look at can, we look at this. We look at the permission to do things, but we also look then at the ability to do things. I can cook, I can write, I can teach, I can walk, I can swim. So we can express that with verb to be, with verb to do, which is can, if I can find my thing here. Here. So can is this direct, hard verb. But we can soften that with verb to be. So with verb to be, we're always going to use an adjective in this case. So how can I express can or can't in this case with verb to be? Well, I'm going to say, I'm not able to go to the party. So the same thing. Able represents ability and permission. And so what's the difference between can't and able? I mean, listen to it. Can't, it's this short, sharp sound, very direct. Able, it's softer, it's adjectives. So verb to be is this softer language, absolutely. So let's come back up here then. So we have, can you look after the kids? Can you look after the kids for a minute? So if we were to do able, we might say, are you able to look after the kids? All right, that's beautiful. That's good. I still think we can reduce the severity of this even more. So are you able to look after the kids? Yes or no? But then how do we express, like in our minds, theoretical situations? We use one model in particular, would. So now instead of are you able, let's make this theoretical. Would you be able to look after the kids? Please. And this is it. So we went from, can you look after the kids, to, would you be able to look after the kids? Now, I could go even further, and we could introduce, like, instead of a kind of more polite direct sentence, let's make it really indirect and say, I was wondering. So we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to wonder? And what's the difference between think and wonder? Well, thinking or thoughts, there's many verbs that represent a type of thinking. Thinking in general is not a good thing. The analogy I like to use for thoughts or for thinking is that a constructive thought is like a fireman's hose. When you aim it at a problem, or the fireman aiming the hose at a house on fire, it's brilliant. It's solving a problem. It's looking for a solution. In general, when most people think, it's the fireman's hose just waving around, wetting everything. This is why we say people are lost in thought. For most people, their mind is like they are the child in the backseat of the car, and their mind is a little TV on the back of their mom's chair playing Finding Nemo over and over and over again. That their thoughts are just this collection of spliced together images of dumb shit they said in the past, things they have to do tomorrow, and just random conversations throughout the day. Some of them where they're playing a hero, solving the world's problems, and some of them where they're thinking that they should be doing more in life. But either way, like most people, their day is just like REM sleep, except they're just watching it as opposed to being a part of that dream. So we could say think on its own isn't like a functional kind of activity. It kind of puts all of them together. We have different types of thought. We have like hopes, like to expect, and to wonder. So what does the wonder mean? There's more, by the way, but let's look at like wonder. So wonder means to kind of to focus on or obsess over a question in your head, and to have that, and then allow thoughts to kind of build around that. So we can look at wonder For example, I could ask you that direct question, what time is it? Or I could ask you or tell you, I was wondering if you had the time. So this will come from, excuse me, do you have the time? So instead of, excuse me, do you have the time? Oh shit, Ken, don't fuck up. I ask you, I was wondering if you had the time. I was wondering tells me that this question here was in my head 10 seconds ago, 1 minute ago, or 1 hour ago. Doesn't matter. This question is in the past. And here, look, it's not a question. It's an embedded question. So the question looks like the structure is the same as a sentence. And our verb here is in the present, but here it's in the past. Why? Because the question was in the past. I'm not actually asking you a question. Once again, this is sleight of hand. You know, I'm telling you the question is in my head. That's the why. And you understand X. Sure, it's 10:48. Now, so I can do that with everything. If my question is a yes/no question, for example, do you like jazz? It'll be always if. I was wondering if, oops, shit, yeah, that's right. If you liked jazz. My verb will be in the past, always. Does he like jazz? I was wondering if he liked jazz. And there again, the verb is in the past. Even though we want to know that thing now, the verb is in the past. Where do you live? I was wondering. So in this case, instead of an if, we just go direct with our question. Where you lived. And that's it. You still live there now in the present, but I'm not asking you a question. I'm telling you I was thinking a question a minute ago, and you're going to say, I live in Sao Paulo. I live in Santa Catarina. I live in Rio. You're going to tell me exactly in the present where you live. So when we look at wondering, though, there's a difference between I wonder and I was wondering. More often, or most of the time, we use I was wondering. I wonder is very different. I wonder is it's me having a thought in the present right now and saying it as I'm having it. So with I was wondering, I'm talking directly to you. With I wonder, you're sitting beside me. And I say out loud, I wonder where Ken is. And then you say, what? Ken, I think he's on his way. So I wonder is me pretending to say something saying something out loud, but I say it loud enough that you invite yourself into my question. I don't ask you the question. I say it so you invite. I try to make you curious. This is like when someone's on Facebook and they write OMG. All right, so what's the next thing that happens? Well, their best friend says, what happened? Now they get to tell their story. They won't just tell their story. They have to invite you to ask them for their story. And then now they're allowed to tell their story. That's exactly what I wonder is. I wonder is, as the thought comes into my mind, as the question comes into my mind, I vocalize it in that second. I wonder what time it is. I wonder when the train arrives. I wonder where the books are. I wonder where Lucy is. You know, I wonder what time the movie starts. As the thought enters my mind, instead of saying it quietly to myself, I say it not to you, but I say it loud enough that you invite yourself in. And so that way I'm not asking you a question directly. You're overhearing me and you're coming into that question. Now, the thing with I wonder is, let's do a situation here. I wonder where I left, where I got my shoes. It's a silly sentence, it's a silly question, but don't worry. I wonder where you got your shoes. I wonder where she got her shoes. Her shoes. I wonder where they got their shoes, and so on. Now, let's say we did this for every pronoun. I, he, she, it, you, they, and we. So only one of these we can't do with wonder. And there's no specific rule for this. It's just that it's eka, nauseous. It's gross, it's weird, it's ugh. And only one specifically. So I know this is a silly sentence. I wonder where I got my shoes. Not really, because fucking old enough that I can't remember where I bought anything or left anything. But this sentence is fine. This one's good. So we'll make this one green. I wonder where she got her shoes. That one's good. I wonder where they got their shoes. For fucking, it's good. So we can see where this is going. This one here, we can't do. I wonder where you got your shoes. Now, why can't we do that? This is a weird one. Is that, let's pretend I'm sitting beside you. Let's pretend I'm sitting in front of you at a meeting. It's the first time we've ever met, or we're in a job interview or something. And I ask you, what did you do on the weekend? And you said, you know, I went to the beach. And I say, yeah, I'm looking at your Instagram profile right now. It's fucking disgusting, right? I mean, in general, Instagram is kind of gross. It's this voyeuristic, bizarre thing. It's gross that people are so self-infatuated, they keep having to take pictures of themselves naked in front of mirrors. And it's more gross that people are just sitting there following it and thinking that it's normal. But what's grosser is that someone looking at something of yours while they're sitting in front of you, it's kind of weird. It's this weird sensation. And so this is the same thing. If I'm thinking about you and vocalizing it while I'm looking at you, it makes us feel weird. I can tell you, or you can tell me, for example, I was wondering where you got your shoes. No problem. That means you thought about me a minute ago. No problem. But if you just say, I wonder where you got your shoes, I think, ew, are you thinking about me? Oh, that's gross. And so for some weird, well, not even a weird reason, it is. Like, it's weird to be in someone's thoughts and for them to vocalize it at that second. It's fucking weird. We can't do this one. So I wonder we use for I, she, and they, we, and the other one, it, but we don't use it for you. For you, we're always going to use I was wondering. And look, in most cases, when we're asking that question to a person, it's always I was wondering. So in this case, we looked at, for example, I was wondering so if we come back to, for example, what did we say? We said, would you be able to look after the kids? All right? So in this case, once again, we want to get rid of the question mark. We want to make this a sentence, not a question. So we're going to come down, we're going to say, I was wondering if, because would is a yes or no question, if, and then you would be able to look after the kids. And that's it. Think about like your indirect sentences are like homeopathy. And I know it's a weird and shitty analogy, especially if you like homeopathy, but like what makes homeopathy magical? And it is. Homeopathy is like magic for you know, older white chicks. But what makes it magical is that the more water you mix into a molecule, the more powerful it becomes. Sorry, keep a straight face. But yeah, the more water you put in, the more powerful that molecule becomes and the more it can help. You mix one molecule of like a Tylenol with an entire ocean, and that's more powerful, like one drop of that ocean is more powerful than the original Tylenol. Sorry, my throat. But we're doing the same thing here. We're diluting our question. The more words you put into your sentence, the more you dilute it. And I know this is like, in the past I talk about, for example, keeping your sentences direct, keeping your sentences clear and simple, subject, verb, object. Yeah, when we describe processes, absolutely, be as direct as possible. But the idea of this language, as shitty as it sounds, a lot of language, look, every bit of language defines every tribe. And so when you go into any tribe, they're going to have a way of utilizing grammar structure that represents the identity of that tribe. And so with this language, all we're looking at is, you know, in many ways, whether it's in academia or maybe it's in higher education and grammar schools, the idea of complex grammar structure is an example of higher education. So like separating one person from another group of people. You know, and to be good in a society is the ability to kind of understand the language of every tribe and to be able to mirror that language as you move through tribes. You know, the traveling salesperson is able to understand the culture of every environment where he or she goes based on the language that represents that. And that when he or she goes into that environment, to use that language, whether it's if it's in kind of more urban environments representing that language. So if it's going into more academic, more business settings, whatever it is, to understand how to reflect the tone, pitch, and articulation of that particular tribe, to not stand out, to not get ejected, to do what you have to do and then move on. So in this case, we're trying to put as much into these sentences as possible. And the more we put in, the less severe, the less impactful they become, the more indirect they become. The more words, the more diluted. You know, following the idea of homeopathy, the more diluted, the more powerful is the premise. So let's look at one more of these then. Let's look at something simple. I hope you will find this useful. Let's pretend someone gave you a present. And so look, already there's nothing wrong with this sentence. Someone gives you a present and says, listen, I hope you find this useful. Now you're looking at it going, what the fuck is this? Oh, fuck. And like, there's nothing worse than me getting a shitty present. I don't know, I don't get presents. I'm a single dad. No one gives me anything. But let's say someone gives you a shitty present. Now, you have to find a use for this thing. You have no idea what it is, what it does, but you feel that if you don't find a use for it, this person is going to be disappointed the next time they come around to your house. So this, once again, there's nothing wrong with the situation. You're giving someone a gift. Once again, we're expressing a version of thinking, which is hoping. So I hope you will find this useful. Okay, so how can we dilute this? How can we make it less severe? All right, so let's look at words inside this sentence that might be pointy, sharp, or brittle. First of all, we'll see this one here, will. In this case, will represents what? 100%. I hope you will find this useful. Jesus Christ. Fuck, what the fuck does it do? Ah, fucking hell. So now I have to find 100% a use for this. Well, can we reduce that 100% to maybe 35%? Is that possible? All right, so we'll say, I hope you might find this useful. All right, that's good. So now we went from will to might. All right, so far, so good. Even still, you know, the focus is on me. And the focus is on me that I still have to fucking find a use for this thing. It's like, Jesus Christ. How do you take the focus off me? Well, let's look at something here. When I was a kid, you could ask for money from dad in two ways. You could say, Dad, can I borrow 20 bucks? Or Dad, can you lend me 20 bucks? All right, so what's the difference between these two sentences, or two questions, sorry? In both, it's identical. We know, for example, the person who wants the money borrows. The person who has the money lends. So they both say the same thing. First of all, we're using borrow lend even though we're not giving dad the money back. You know, the correct question would be, Dad, can you donate me? Can you give me, invest in me 20 bucks? But we use borrow and lend because we like to give the idea that the money would be returned, generally through love. But we would use one, I would use one of these always. And the focus is in like what the verbs mean and the subject of our sentence. So first of all, if we look at what is a subject in a sentence, we know a sentence always has three parts. Our subject is our protagonist. Now, in every form of storytelling, I don't give a shit what type of book you're writing, what type of fantastic story. There are only three characters in a story. That's it. Everyone else is just the baloney that's added to make the sandwich look bigger and better, or to help explain those three characters. But all you have in a story, and even in like this Freud's superego, you have the doer of the action. So the active person, which is our subject. Whoops, our subject. And the subject can only ever be the hero or the villain. That's it. There's no ifs or buts about it. The doer of the action is either someone who did something good or someone who did something bad. When you do something good in your life, you're like, God damn, I kick ass. When you do something wrong and you know it's your fault, you're like, I'm a piece of shit. You're either Batman or you're the Joker. And then, as the receiver of the action, there is the victim. That's it. That's it. It doesn't matter how complex or wonderful your story is. There's Batman, there's the Joker, who are the same person, and then there's Gotham. That's it. When something bad happens in your life, either it's your fault, you're like, oh, I'm a piece of shit. Why the fuck did I do that? What the fuck is wrong with me? Jesus Christ. Or you're the victim. Oh, this is so typical. I mean, this type of thing always happens to me. This system is unjust and unfair. Someone really needs to do something about this. This is not right. And when anything goes wrong in your life, your brain will toggle between being the villain and the victim of that situation. Very rarely, but when it does, something goes right, you are the hero. And so we know the subject of that sentence, the person doing the action, can only be one of these two things. Can only be the hero or the villain. So we have to ask, who's the hero and who's the villain in these two sentences? Well, what's the difference between these two verbs? First of all, we know there's two different subjects. In the first one, I am the subject. In the first one, Dad is the subject. But then we have to look at these verbs. Well, borrow, it's a terrible verb. It is. It's like, ugh, borrowing money again. Ugh, it's terrible. Whereas lend, it's a noble verb. Verbo nobili. Yeah, to lend is something very, very noble to do. So this, again, is another idea of what we call sleight of hand. Instead of putting the focus on me as the villain of the story, can I borrow? I put the focus on my dad as the hero of the story. Can you lend? And I am the poor damsel in distress. Can you lend me $20? My dad says, he wants to say no, of course he does, but his brain wants to be the hero always. So he gives me the $20, and by the time he says, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, you're always fucking, I'm already out the door. Fucking halfway down the fucking street, running with the money in my teeth. And so this is what we call the sleight of hand. We change the focus. Instead of focusing on this subject, I focus on this subject. All right, so can we do the same type of thing here? So we have, I hope you might find this useful. All right, how do you take me out of this? Well, what we do is we now focus on our object. You know, if we have our, let me fix up our color spectrum here. So we have our subject, our verb, and our object. Oh shit, that's not what I wanted. I wanted black and I wanted green. There we go. So I have my subject, verb, object. So if I want to just take me out of it, or let's say I'm giving the book to you, I don't want to put the focus on you. I want to put the focus on the present. So I hope this. All of a sudden now the present is the subject of our sentence. Now we still want might, but what do we need with passive structure? That's right, we need verb to be. To make passive structure, we need, for example, the class is taught, the class will be taught, the class has been taught, the class should be taught. So I hope this might be, and so we can't use find, because find is a verb that can only be used by an active, But we want to use useful here. So as the adjective, we need verb to be. So I hope this might be useful. So what do? We went from I hope you will to I hope you might to I hope this might be useful. But we can still make this 1 degree more indirect, a little softer. And so is there any word in this sentence that is maybe either very stern, very, very hard, or even 100% of something? So I hope, no, that's fine, this, fine, might, fine, be, fine, useful. Okay, what's wrong with this sentence, you say? Well, nothing, right? Useful, utile. Okay, so useful, we can say is full of use. So what you're telling me is this thing has to be full of use. Not only might be, but still, even though there's a percentage chance, but you want still, you're hoping that this thing is not like a little bit useful, you're still hoping a 30% chance that it's full of use. Jesus. So we can look at another way, and I did this in one of my short videos. If we look at the word awe, awe means that some experience is like reverential that you see. That when you experience awe, first of all, it's a state of being. We always say, I was in awe, as if you were in San Francisco or you were in Quebec. It's a place, you're like, holy fuck. It basically means you're without words. Some experience takes the words, your breath, and everything. And it appears something biblical before you. Okay, so when we can say that something was, so it was, awesome. So what is awesome? Some awe. And we can say it was awful, which we know is disgusting, the worst thing in the world. And what is that? Full of awe. So we could have some awe. Like I always like to look at awe like salt. I fucking hate salt as it is. We don't use salt in our house. But let's look at that an example. It's Brazil after all. So if you put a little bit of salt in your food will taste fantastic. Anything will taste fantastic. But if you put too much salt, fucking terrible. It's the worst taste in the world. And that's like awe. Some awe or a little bit of awe is awesome. The greatest thing in the world. Too much awe, or for something to be awful or full of awe, is the worst thing in the world. So we want to do the same thing here. We have useful, full of use. All right, so how can we reduce that? Just one bit. Well, we could say, I hope this might be of some use. And so now, look at what we did from this point here. Let me make this a little smaller for us. We went from, I hope you will find this useful. Look, already, there's nothing wrong with this sentence. We're giving someone a gift. But we're putting the fact that they have to find a use for this thing. And so we reduce that. Listen, I hope you might find this useful. Thanks, but the focus is still on me. Well, I hope this might be useful. Thanks, but God, I still got to find a use for it. Listen, I hope this might be of some use. And there we're saying, listen, if you can't find a use for it, that's fine. But if at least once in your life you use this thing, that would be fantastic. And I hope it does something for you to make your life better or to make your life easier. So here we just found ways to reduce the impact. Once again, to like reduce the percentages and as well to make those words softer. You know, by removing you and putting the focus only on the object itself. And then by, you know, working with adjectives as opposed to working with verbs. So this is the idea of our indirect speech. Our indirect speech, what we're trying to do is to be essentially less direct. Direct is fantastic for processes. You know, when we look at, when I explained before, the difference between verb to be and verb to do. Verb to do is the process. Verb to be is the result of that process. So if I say, I am tired, that's the result. And you might say, why? I say, well, I have been working, training and recording all morning. So that's the process. The process always explains the result. And yes, nearly all the time, in my concept, because I don't ask people for many favors, I'd say pretty much most of my life is built around processes and trying to be clear, succinct, like just using short words and making things as easy to understand as possible. If I'm telling a story, I want you to follow A, B, C, D, E, F, so you understand at the end. But when it comes time to asking questions specifically, asking someone for help, for anything, yeah, we want to be indirect. We want to soften that language as much as possible. In some ways, because we feel guilty that we're asking someone for something, because we don't like asking people for help. We like to do everything ourselves. And other level as well, once again, it's a show of intellect. We use this more complex language to show that we belong at this table and other people don't belong at that table. Sounds shitty, but the people at that other table, they also have their language that separates the people at the other tables. Every tribe has its set of words, and the way that tribe uses those words that define its identity, and its identity is defined by the actions, and they become its culture. And so if we want to move in between all those tribes, which we do, we want to leave our car with a manabrista, we want to, if we have people coming into our houses to do work, if we have to speak to a president of a company, if we have to deal with anyone in any different environment, we have to understand the nature of the respectful language in that environment and to adapt and change to it. And our ability to know the differences in language determines, how easy our experience is, and and in the end of the day, us being able to get what we need to get in life, which is bananas. Bananas both crazy and bananas the fruit. All right, that's it. Nah, don't worry about liking and subscribing. That shit's fucking overrated. Watch the video. Don't like. Don't subscribe. Don't tell anyone about these videos. I hope you got something from this. If you didn't, well, you're not going to get to this part of the end, and no one ever gets to the fucking end of these things. If you did, are you okay?